Greetings and welcome to week 5 unit 3 on spiritual domain. We have understood some ways of addressing affective domain in the previous unit. I will continue on the same journey and try to, in this unit, we will try to understand the nature of spiritual domain. To talk about the spiritual domain, I feel a little hesitant because once you utter the word spiritual or spirit, you have endless number of views, and several people can feel offended also if you make some statements. So please, the purpose is not to sell you on particular what do you call a faith or a way of working and so on. It is to identify something that can possibly lead us in a certain direction. We will not say this is the ultimate, but these are the things that we talk about, these skills that we talk about in this unit are something one cannot object to, because that is a path that we all take, but whatever that is presented is not necessarily the ultimate. How you want to acquire that skill is your choice, depending on your faith. Okay, that is the preamble I would like to share with you, because I am no authority on any of the methods or views on any religion or any spiritual practice. Spiritual intelligence, unlike cognitive intelligence or emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence addresses why we do things and not just how. We need to understand why am I doing something, and it mainly addresses that. It supports, if you have spiritual intelligence, it supports ethical leadership, resilience, personal fulfillment and responsible innovation, especially valuable in engineering, healthcare and education. The academic foundations for the spiritual intelligence by non-religious thinkers. It is not that there is a conflict between religious thinkers and non-religious thinkers. No, I am only quoting the academic foundations as given by non-religious thinkers. For example, Dana Zohar, SQ, that is spiritual quotient as they call it, as the intelligence with which we solve problems of meaning and value. Limited definition. If one cannot have objection to that, but one may say that is a very limited view of either spirituality or whatever or spiritual intelligence. Robert Emmons, a psychologist, studied SQ as a capacity to frame everyday experiences in meaningful ways. That is how he has defined. One Cindy Wigglesworth created a faith-neutral, skill-based model of spiritual intelligence, focusing on inner and outer alignment, higher self-awareness and purpose. That is Cindy Wigglesworth. And we will be going with Cindy Wigglesworth, the definition of spirituality and spiritual intelligence. She defines spirituality is the innate human need to be connected to something larger than ourselves, something we consider to be divine or of exceptional nobility. You may, there is nothing to object into this, but some of you may feel that it is a limited way of talking about spirituality. It may be true, will not, but there is no inherent contradiction or deviation from this in any faith. Okay. Religion is a specific set of beliefs and practices usually based on a sacred text or several sacred texts and represented by a community of people. That is what religion is. There is always a set of beliefs and practices and some sacred texts. Spiritual intelligence is the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace regardless of the situation. So, if you limit spiritual intelligence as the ability to behave with wisdom and compassion, yes, it may not represent what you consider as spirituality, but you cannot have, you can consider it as limited, but at least that much one needs to attain if you want to be spiritual, whatever definition, personal definition you have. And this is presented in her book on SQ 21, 21 skills of spiritual intelligence. Okay. Now, she defines it formally. Spiritual intelligence is the capacity to access, apply and embody deep meaning, values and purpose in life in ways that promote personal integrity, compassion and the common good without relying on any specific religious belief or tradition in faith neutral and religion agnostic sense. She might have come from Catholic faith and she might have traversed through that path, but what she presented is still faith neutral. To that extent, one may approach this, one may acquire these skills through whatever faith that you have belief in and whatever practices that you have. We are only focusing on what skills that one needs to acquire to be spiritually intelligent. That is all. This is limited to that. For example, NEP 2020, it says education must develop not only cognitive capacities, both the foundational capacities of literacy and numeracy and higher order cognitive capacities such as critical thinking and problem solving, but also social, ethical and emotional capacities and dispositions. So, to that extent, it is acknowledging that you talk about cognitive, affective and spiritual domains, they are all included. Education must build character, enable learners to be ethical, rational, compassionate and caring, while at the same time prepare them for gainful, fulfilling employment. That is spiritual intelligence. Well, NEP 2020 does not directly mention spiritual intelligence as a word. It clearly promotes its core aspects through holistic education, value based learning, emotional and ethical development and spiritual growth. It mentions all of them. Now, further let me integration into the curriculum. How do we integrate the spiritual intelligence or teachings of that or acquiring those skills into the curriculum is what is required. Multidisciplinary education that is what the NEP 2020 says. Students are encouraged to engage with arts, philosophy, yoga and ethics alongside STEM to develop the whole being. That is that statement made in that. Vocational education, life skills and soft skills include affective and spiritual elements, mindfulness, resilience and value clarification. For example, many institutions have already included courses like yoga, universal human values and courses from arts and philosophy. This has already been done, but not necessarily in a properly integrated manner. Courses are offered, whether it achieved its intended purpose or not, we do not know. But for the courses to serve the intended purpose, we need a taxonomy of the spiritual domain similar to the taxonomies of cognitive and affective domains. So, to say, let us say you run a course on yoga, how do you test that the intended purpose of having that course is served? Do you have any kind of taxonomy of those learnings, and you have any measurement method for that? That needs to be done. You practice and possibly somebody tests that whether you can perform some asanas the right way, but is that sufficient or is there something more? So, spiritual intelligence, though shortened as SQ, not as SI, of Wigglesworth provides such a taxonomy. And the spiritual path is everybody attempts. Sometimes people say we work after retirement, we will try to take this spiritual path. Some people try to do early. Spiritual growth is one of the life's most rewarding and most frustrating endeavors. You cannot say nobody ever wants to grow spiritually. Everybody wants to grow spiritually, and what is that growth may mean different things to different people. Okay? The hunger and restlessness that draws us to the spiritual path is one of the most precious sentiments that human beings experience, because it is our doorway to growth. So many different paths seem to guarantee solutions. We all know, right? All of us have experienced. Sometimes you follow some guru or some Swamiji, and whatever practices that he gives, you think that is a path that you need to follow. Some people hang on to that and grow from there also. And after some time on a chosen path, people remain confused or frustrated. You cannot say everybody that follows one particular guru has grown spiritually. They seem to be confused and frustrated. Is it possible to have a path that is faith neutral and religion agnostic that can guide a person to grow? So, here the focus is on measurement. If you are talking of spiritual intelligence, how do I measure whether I acquired the necessary skills to what level? Because there are levels of skills also, right? If you are doing a 100-meter run, are you doing it in 13 seconds, 12 seconds? Now something like less than 10 seconds. So, there are levels of acquiring these skills as well. So, to quote Max Planck in his scientific autobiography, an experiment is a question which science poses to nature, and a measurement is the recording of nature's answer. Nature gives you an answer, but it is through the measurement that you make. Many people consider matters of spirit are immeasurable by nature. can't measure spiritual growth, they may say. Wigglesworth presents a model that looks at spiritual intelligence as a skill set and presents instruments to measure these skills. You may have reservations about the details, but let us take a look at it. It is called SQ21 or 21 skills. The measurement of 21 skills helps a person to self-assess whatever be his or her definition of spirit or transcendent oneness. So, you can use any of these words. Now, Wigglesworth taxonomy of spiritual domain is again a 4-quadrant one. The first one is capital self stroke small self awareness. We will talk about capital self and small self, and then universal awareness, and then self, capital self and small self mastery, and finally social mastery or spiritual presence. These are the 4 quadrants that have been identified. So, one is on self, whether capital self or small self. The other one is with the rest of the society or the rest of the world. Now, you can relate this one to EQ to SQ. If you look at EQ, what we presented in the earlier unit, you have also self-awareness, self-management, social awareness and social skills. But this is all at the individual level, and here you are talking about capital self-awareness, capital self-mastery, and then universal awareness and spiritual presence. And in fact, if you look at one step backwards, in the cognitive domain we have metacognitive knowledge. Metacognition is related to knowing your own cognition, self-awareness of cognition, and cognitive management or cognitive what do you call regulation. You call it regulation, self-regulation and self-awareness cognitively. That is what it is. So, in my opinion, right from cognitive domain metacognition to spiritual domain, these are somewhat similar, self and outside the self. That is how it is organized. Now, let us quickly run through the skill levels are the 21 skills. We are not talking about levels right now. Skill 1, awareness of own worldview. This itself is a major step that one requires to be aware of one's own worldview. Okay. Skill 2, awareness of life purpose. Do you have any particular life purpose? Skill 3, awareness of values hierarchy. Skill 4, complexity of inner thought. Skill 5, awareness of ego self and higher self. Okay, small self is ego self and capital self is higher self. That is how it has been presented. And quadrant 2, universal awareness. Skill 6, awareness of interconnectedness of life. We are all interconnected, we are connected to the nature. Okay. Awareness, skill 7, awareness of worldviews of others. Skill 8, breadth of time perception. Skill 9, awareness of limitations, power of human perception. Skill 10, awareness of spiritual laws. Skill 11, experience of transcendent oneness. You are experiencing transcendent oneness. Now quadrant 3 is related to, I should have put capital letters, capital self and self mastery, commitment to spiritual growth, keeping higher self in charge, living your purpose and values, sustaining faith, seeking guidance from higher self. Okay, these are skills 12 to 16, these 5 skills related to self mastery. And finally quadrant 4, social mastery as spiritual presence. Skill 17, being a wise and effective teacher, mentor of spiritual principles. Skill 18, being a wise and effective leader or change agent. Skill 19, making compassionate and wise decisions. Skill 20, being a calming, healing presence. Skill 21, being aligned with the ebb and flow of life. Okay. Now it is nice to give a long list, but under each one you have different levels and there are different practices to achieve with respect to each skill different levels. So here we talk about skill levels, and if you treat measurement as your friend, not as somebody who is outsider is judging you, measure fearlessly and grow freely. That is the slogan here. Each skill level is rated from 1 to 5. Okay. Like rubrics, we have 1 to 5. When one scores by self assessment, when you are measuring yourself with respect to these items for each skill, a lot of emotional buttons get pushed. You are agitated, something you cannot positively answer for something. So, a lot of emotional buttons get pushed. Even those who are enthusiastic about the idea of measurement sometimes start to feel different if they start to see scores with numbers that are low. If you honestly, because you are scoring for yourself, nobody is scoring it for you unless you want to take the help of a mentor. When the numbers are low, obviously you lose enthusiasm, and but do not look at it as somebody judging you, but it will tell you in what direction, in what way you should be growing. So, it is important to remember that the reason we are measuring is not to judge ourselves or one another, but to allow ourselves to grow, develop and become more fully who we are. Okay, we will take one example as given by Cindy Wigglesworth. Skill 5, awareness of ego self and higher self. In her book she has given only this as the detailed one. For others you have to log into their course and pay something for that to get all the details, and possibly even you can get mentored if you wish. The 5-level scoring system, because there are 5 levels, you achieve level 1 if I have basic understanding that an ego self exists and that how it reacts to things is a result of my personal experiences since birth, including the influence of my family and my culture. So, I am able, if I have the basic understanding of the ego self and that it is result of my life's experiences from childhood. So, you have, if you acknowledge to yourself, that is my ego self, okay, you are at level 1. Level 2, I can observe my own ego in operation. I understand there is a difference between the desires of my ego and my higher self. So, if I am able to see whether my ego self is responding or a higher self is responding. So, if I am able to see my own ego in operation properly, then I am at level 2. I can recognize the situations and types of people that trigger my ego self to want to take charge. That means I may have several triggers. Some people, if they come, my ego self kind of gets triggered, and my reactions are always based on that ego self. I recognize the signals my body gives me when my ego has been triggered. Okay. Let us say right at home you want something to be happening and others do not do it that way, and immediately your ego self gets triggered, and then you get into, if you are man of the house, maybe you want to declare this is how things should be done, or otherwise you get into a severe argument and you have a fight. Level 4, I can consistently hear the voice of my higher self. This may be felt sense in the body of an auditory or visual experience or a combination. I may not hear it often. It is not that I am continuously hearing the voice of the higher self, but occasionally I may hear, but I know when I do. I am learning to listen to it. I understand how my thoughts and beliefs are creating the anger or fear level, fear that I feel. 5th level, the voice of my higher self is now the principal voice I hear. Ego is now in joyful service to spirit. I no longer feel a tug of war between these two parts of myself. I think it is one skill that we acquire, we have traversed a very, very long way. That is why I picked this up, and I think all of you will be able to understand what this means, and you can practice. Okay. And similarly you have for all the remaining 20 skills, you have different levels defined, and there are practices that are given. As I said, like you go to a guru or a Swamiji to grow spiritually, so you can also go to a mentor who is available online, and obviously you have to pay, because even going to a guru or a Swamiji is not cheap either. You end up paying considerable amount of money. So here also, if you are willing to pay to a mentor, they can guide you to acquire at least 1 or 2 of these skills. Okay. So in the next unit we completely change the track and understand how to write very mundane things like program educational objectives and program specific outcomes. And thank you for your attention.